أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، واللعنة دائمة الباقي إلى أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى. صلوات. We are into the month of Muharram and Safar, where the Azah and the morning ceremonies of the tragedy of Karbala are continuing. I would like to take this opportunity this evening very briefly to talk about a concept that I in a very passing manner talked about it on Monday night speech I had at the Jaffrey Community Center. And that was about the importance of the day of Ashura. We know it is the day of tragedy. The Shias all over the world basically commemorate this event. And the entire tradition of mourning and grieving on that day is totally a religious issue, in a sense that it is based on the teachings of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. And we see that all the Imams who came after the events of Karbala, each of them suffered in one way or another. But when you talk to them, you will see they will not talk about the suffering of their father. They will always say, remember my grandfather Husayn. Among the Imams, you can say, it's difficult to compare one with the other on the issue of musibat and suffering. But you can say that even when it comes to Imam Musa al-Kazim alayhi salatu wasalam, his musibat and his suffering was very unique, in a sense that he is the only Imam who died in the prison. And the way they brought his body out in order to kind of humiliate the Shias in Baghdad. But if you go to Imam Rizvi alayhi salam and you ask him, the Imam, which day should I remember? Whose musibat should I remember? He will not even talk about his father. He will always say, remember Husayn ibn Ali. The famous narration we have from him with Ibn Shabib, which is a very longer conversation, where it was expected eve of the day of the first of Muharram. So Imam asked Ibn Shabib, what is the news? Has the moon been sighted or not? And then when he said yes, today is the first of at the eve of the first Muharram, then Imam started talking to him, and he said something. The earlier statements are very powerful, which are actually part of what I would describe in a Masayib, but I just wanted to give you the sense of what I say about the day of Ashura. Where Imam says to Ibn Shabib, he says, Ibn Shabib, in kunta bakiyan ala shay'in. O Ibn Shabib, if you have to cry on anything, if you really have to grieve and cry on any musibat, then he says, Fabka ala Husayn. Cry on Husayn. And then he says something which is very unique to Imam Husayn alayhi salam. He says, لأنه ذبح كما يذبح الكبش. Because he was slaughtered the way a sheep is slaughtered. According to our belief, we believe that all the 11 Imams are Shaheed. And almost all of them became Shaheed by poisoning. It's only two cases where we see this sword is used. In the case of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen and Imam Husayn. But even among the two of them, there is a difference. Imam Husayn, Amir al-Mu'mineen was struck on his head, on the forehead actually. And because of that, he passed away after 2 days. But when it comes to Imam Husayn alayhi salam, basically his shahadat, it's unique even among the shuhada of Karbala. All the shuhada of Karbala first died and then their heads were severed from their body. But when it comes to Abu Abdullah al-Husayn, this is where Imam Rada alayhi salam says, لِأَنَّهُ ضُبِحَ. His death was by slaughtering, the way a sheep is slaughtered. And so when we talk about remembering the day of Ashura, it is a very important day, and it is a day which is only for the Azaa of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And I would like to, actually go back to these words that we see. It is very common among the khutaba and the orators where they say, La yawm ka yawmik ya Aba Abdullah. That, O Husayn, there is no day like yours. It is very special, very unique. You know who uttered these words? These words were first time uttered about the day of Ashura, before Ashura, by Imam Hassan Mushtaba alayhi salam. When Imam Hassan was already poisoned, of course, Husayn is the brother. He would go and visit him all the time. And one day he came, he looked at his older brother, and he started crying. And Imam Hassan alayhi salam basically asked him, Ma yubkika ya Aba Abdullah. Husayn, why are you crying? And this is where Imam Hassan alayhi salam says, Abki lima yusna' bika. I am crying for what has happened to you, what they have done to you. And that is where Imam Husayn alayhi salam says that, yes, I have been poisoned and I will, die because of that. وَلَكِنْ لَا يَوْمْ كَيَوْمِكَ يَا أَبَا عَبْدِ اللَّهِ. Imam Hassan says to Husayn but your day is unique. There is no day like your day, or Abu Abdullah. And this is where we see, then he goes on to talk about, how the followers of our grandfather will be there and the way they'll kill you and, even trample on your body, mutilate your body. Then he talks about the issue of how they will loot the properties and even, make your family members prisoners. So Imam Hassan alayhi salam, even before Ashura, is talking about the importance of the day of Ashura, where he says, La yawm ka yawmik ya Aba Abdullah. There is no day like yours, O Aba Abdullah. And this is where we have to realize that when we talk about, Azaa of Sayyid al-Shuhada, these are not things only made up by the ulama, on the basis of emotionalism. This actually comes from the sources of religious, teachings that we have, the Imams alayhi salam themselves. Salawat. एक बार और सलावत पढ़ने। Sometimes the issue comes up where people talk about the tragedies happen in human history that happened before Ashura, even after Ashura, even now. People are killed, they are massacred. And so they say, then what is the comparison there? You see, what they miss out is you are looking at the person there. Husayn ibn Ali was not, just a victim or was unknown in that way. No, he actually went out with a stand and an opinion and an understanding, where the challenge was that you do bay'at to Yazid, otherwise we'll kill you. And Husayn ibn Ali chose that. He said, I'll not give in. I will not give my hand in the hand of a tyrant like Yazid. This is where, the famous words which are uttered these days, Hayat min dhilla. This is coming from Imam Husayn alayhi salam at that moment, on the day of Ashura. He says, this Ad-Da'i ibn Ad-Da'i, referring to Ibn Ziyad, that this illegitimate son of a illegitimate father has placed me at a crossroad, that either I give in to a tyrant ruler or I, accept, fight, and I know that I'm not going to survive in that way. And this is where he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Anbiya and Mursaleen, my pure fathers and my pure mothers, and even the mu'mineen, would not accept that I go through the humiliation of doing allegiance or bay'at to Yazid. And this is where he uses the term hayhat min dhillah. I will not accept that humiliation and insult. Rather, I will go with an honorable death, which is shahadat in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we have to realize, it's not like anyone's, going around not even knowing whom they are killing, and they just shoot them or explode a bomb. That's a very different thing. Yes, they are victims in that way, they are Muslim in that way. But, this is somebody who had a choice. And he decided that I'm not going to give in for the sake of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And who is that person? It's not only that an individual who had that courage and to come up with that, outlook. He is the hujjat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On the face of the earth at that time, there was no one as a hujjat of Allah but Husayn ibn Ali. So when it comes to the level of humanity, he is at the top. And so when he is attacked or when he is killed, this is very different from other events before and after it that we are talking about. So it's not an issue of, comparing how many people were killed with Imam Husayn, how many people are being killed in this event or that event. No, that is not the issue of comparison there. You have to look at the person who was killed. All others were basically, there as a support for Husayn ibn Ali alayhi salatu wa salam. Salawat. We have an example in form of Prophet Yunus. Is it Prophet Yunus? The prophet who had this miracle of camel. Let me test your memory here. Prophet Saleh. Good. Just testing to see you remember or not. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him what? A miraculous sign, which was a she camel. And it came out from the mountain. And this was the miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the point was that, it is, the water source that we have, the camel will use one day, and the next day the people will use, and alternatively, this is where they actually disagreed with Saleh alayhi salam. And the surah that we recite in Eid, it talks about it. There, if you see the term, the person who went and killed the she camel of Hazrat Saleh, he is known as Ashqa al-Awwaleen. Ashqa is from Shaqi. Shaqi means somebody who is the most wretched. the most unfortunate person. You know, he is totally devoid of any tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the term in history, in Islamic literature, is used as ashqal awwaleen for that person who killed the she camel of Salih alayhi salam. Rasulullah actually uses the same term when he talks about the murderer of Amir al-Mu'mineen. You know, it was in this famous khutbah of Rasulullah in welcoming the month of Ramadan. And it's a very powerful khutbah. We also normally, go through it in the beginning of Ramadan. At the end, Amir al-Mu'mineen stood up and asked a question, that what is the best deed for this month? Rasulullah responded, but then he started crying. And Ali, he was surprised that I just asked a question, what happened? Why are you crying? And this is where Rasulullah says, I can see the day. It will be the month of Ramadan, where you will be attacked by ashqal akhirin. Ashqal awwaleen is the person who killed the naqa, the she camel of Salih alayhi salam. And now Rasulullah is using the same term for Ibn Muljim, where ashqal akhirin, the ashqal from the most wretched person from the latter days, will do this, where he will attack you and he will basically dye your beard with blood. And so we see this terminology from the Quran to the hadith of Rasulullah. And then you talk about Imam Husayn alayhi salam. At that time, as a hujjat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the person who is killing him is ashqal akhirin, one of that, from that category. And so when we talk about the tragedy of Karbala, we have to realize that, you cannot look at the numbers and say, okay, there were 72 killed here, 72,000 on this event, for example. These are not same way of looking at things. And this is where our imams basically have, emphasized. And when they talk about the day of Ashura, they say, O Husayn, there is no la yawm ka yawmik ya Aba Abdullah. Salawat pढ़ने के बाद. एक बार और सलवात पढ़ने के. This was also actually the same terminology which is there from Imam Hassan alayhi salam. Salawat. Which is also used by Imam Sajjad about the day of Ashura, where he says, وَلَا يَوْمْ كَيَوْمِ الْحُسَيْنِ. There is no day comparable to the day of Husayn alayhi salam. And so, and even Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, where he says, إن يوم الحسين عليه السلام أعظم مصيبة من جميع صائر الأيام. That the day of Husayn, referring to the day of Ashura, is the day of أعظم مصيبة, the greatest of the tragedy in all the times and days. And so this expression and the importance which has been given, we have to keep in mind that sanctity of the day of Ashura, the importance of the day of Ashura, the uniqueness of the day of Ashura. And that is why you will see that the Banu Umayyah, on the other hand, they tried to cover up their own crimes because they didn't realize that the reaction which is happening after the shahadat of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. Most credit, of course, goes to Bibi Zainab and Imam Sajjad, for their sermons and highlighting the Mazlumiyat of Imam Husayn alayhi salam, all the way to Damascus, which is the capital of Yazid. And this is where they went around trying to dilute the event, and they started this whole issue of saying that, the day of Ashura is actually a very blessed day in the history of religions. And they took all the important events in history and started to link that to the day of Ashura. The day of, they say Adam's Tawbah was accepted, it was the day of Ashura. Noah's, ark reached to the, basically settled down, that was the day of Ashura. Musa parted the sea, that was the day of Ashura. All the major events in the history of religions, now Ashura became a very blessed day. And so, this is the day you should celebrate, and, this is the day of barakat. And one of the elements they used to it, that was the issue of, saying because it is a happy day, it is recommended to fast on that day. And so this is where we have to realize that, the day of Ashura has been even attacked by Banu Umayyah in that way. And this is where you will see that, even our fuqaha, some of them go with the narrations which are not really that strong. But even then they will say that change your intention on that day from fasting to what we normally call, faqa, which means you abstain from food and drink without doing the niyat of fasting. And you basically break that day of faqa by the evening time, late afternoon. And so this is where we have to realize that when we talk about the day of Ashura and the importance of the day of Ashuras, and especially the uniqueness of that, this is actually rooted in the teachings of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. Salawat. Actually, Sheikh Abbas Qummi in Mafatihul Jinan, now there's also a translation of that in English. You can see when he talks about the day of Ashura, he refers to this issue, that how Banu Umayyah basically wanted to portray this as a day of blessing in order to hide the importance of the tragedy of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. Let me, in Urdu conclude with the Masaib. Salawat pढ़ने के बाद. आशुरा के दिन के बारे में let me probably it's better to speak about this in English before I go to the Masaib. Just everybody's then is on the same page at the end. Actually, somebody by the name of Abdullah bin Fadl al-Hashimi, he asked Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, and may Allah bless him for this question. This is how we came to know all these things. He says, يا ابن رسول الله كيف سار يوم عاشوراء يوم مصيبة وغم وجزع وبكاء دون اليوم الذي قبض فيه رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم واليوم الذي ماتت فيه فاطمة عليه السلام واليوم الذي قتل فيه أمير المؤمنين ويوم الذي قتل فيه الحسن بالسم. He actually put this question, he says, يا ابن رسول الله, O the son of the Prophet, how come the day of Ashura became the day of musibat, tragedy, gham, sadness, and mourning and crying, but not the day of the wafat of Rasulullah? Means on the level of intensity of the sorrow that we feel on the day of Ashura is not there on the day of Rasulullah's wafat on 28th of Safar. And then he says, even what about the day when Fatima passed away? What about the day Amir al-Mu'minin was killed compared to that day? or the day when Hassan was killed with the poison. And this is where now the point is that it's not an ordinary person explaining that. This is the sixth Imam now responding to this question, and it's a very unique, interesting way of looking at it. He says, إن يوم الحسين أعظم مصيبة من جميع سائر الأيام. He says the reason why the day of Husayn is the greatest day of tragedy, because وذلك أن أصحاب الكساء الذي كانوا أكرم الخلق على الله كانوا خمسة. He relates to the whole issue of أهل كساء. أصحاب كساء 5 individuals: Rasulullah, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Bibi Fatima, and Hassan and Husayn. Even among our 14 Masumin, they are at the top. Panjatan, as we call them. And so he is relating to that status that they had. He said that, Ashab Kisa were the most honorable people in the eyes of Allah. And فَلَمَّا مَضَى عَنْهُمُ النَّبِي بَقِيَ أَمِيرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَفَاطِمَةَ وَالْحَسَنَ وَالْحُسَيْنَ. He says when Rasulullah passed away from those 5 individuals, he says still Amir al-Mu'minin was there, Fatima was there, Hassan was there, Husayn was there. فَكَانَ فِيهِمْ لِلنَّاسِ عَزَاءٌ وَصَلْوَةٌ فَلَمَّا, and then they were there, and even they in a way grieved that day, but still you have 4 out of the 5 Ashab Kisa. And then he says فَلَمَّا مَضَتْ فَاطِمَةٌ كَانَ فِي أَمِيرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْحَسَنِ وَالْحُسَيْنِ لِلنَّاسِ أَزَاءٌ. He says, but when Bibi Fatima passed away, people still could look at Amir al-Mu'minin, Hassan and Husayn as part of the remaining Ashab Kisa. And then he says فَلَمَّا مَضَى مِنْهُمْ أَمِيرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And when Amir al-Mu'minin passed away, كَانَ لِلنَّاسِ فِي الْحَسَنِ وَالْحُسَيْنِ أَزَاتٌ وَسَلْوَةٌ. They could still look at Hassan and Husayn as a remnant of Ashab Kisa and get kind of a solace, in their hearts. فَلَمَّا مَضَى الْحَسَنِ. And when Imam Hassan passed away, Husayn was there, representing all of them. فَلَمَّا قُتِلَ الْحُسَيْنِ. Now he comes to this. He says, but when Husayn was killed, لم يبقى ولم يكن بقي من أهل الكساء أحد للناس فيه بعده. But after him there was nobody from the 5 أهل كساء. فكان ذهابه, so his going away, or if I may put it, his passing away, like passing away of all of them together. And his existence there was as if all of them are still alive. इसी हदीस के उन्वान से जो कॉन्सेप्ट इमाम जाफ़र सादिक़ अलैहिस्सलाम ने पेश किया है अहले किसा के उन्वान से, चूँकि अय्याम अहले हरम हैं, जनाब ज़ैनब की मुसीबत भी अज़ीम मुसीबत है। वो फरमाती हैं, ये जुमला जनाब ज़ैनब का भी है कि आज जो है मेरे लिए बड़ा मुसीबत का दिन है। आज वो दिन है जैसे रसूलुल्लाह गुज़र चुके हैं, आज वो दिन है कि जनाब फ़ातिमा गुज़र चुकी हैं, आज वो दिन है कि अमीरुल मोमिनीन गुज़र चुके हैं, आज वो दिन है कि इमाम हसन गुज़र चुके हैं। इसलिए कि ज़ैनब ने सबको देखा था, 5 को। रसूलुल्लाह की वफ़ात के बाद फिर भी माँ थी, तसल्ली देने वाली थी, बाबा थे, दोनों भाई थे। जनाब सैयदा की वफ़ात के बाद बाबा का साया था, सपोर्ट था, वो देखती थी उनको। लेकिन फिर उनकी भी शहादत वाक़ई हो जाती है। उसके बाद फिर भी दोनों बड़े भाई मौजूद थे जो तसल्ली के लिए उनको देखने के से कम उनकी ढारस बंधी हुई रहती थी। फिर इमाम हसन को भी इस जहर के ज़रिए शहीद कर दिया गया। जो मनाजिर जनाब ज़ैनब ने देखे हैं इन तमाम शहादतों में, आखिर में इमाम हसन की शहादत के बाद زینب کے لیے کون رہ گیا تھا؟ صرف حسین ابن علی تھے. اور اس لیے آپ دیکھیں کہ جب مدینے سے نکلنے کی بات ہوئی تو زینب بھی ساتھ ساتھ چلی، اس لیے کہ یہ اہل کساء میں سے آخری فرد ہیں. جب وہ حسین کو دیکھتی ہیں تو حسن بھی سامنے ہیں، امیر المومنین بھی سامنے ہیں، فاطمہ بھی سامنے ہیں، رسول اللہ بھی سامنے ہیں. لیکن جب امام حسین علیہ السلام کی شہادت واقع ہوئی ہے، جناب زینب کے لیے یہ پورا منظر جو ہے بدل جاتا ہے. اب وہ نہ رسول رہے، نہ علی رہے، نہ فاطمہ رہیں، نہ حسن رہے. حسین کی شہادت نے در حقیقت اس سلسلے اہل کساء کا خاتمہ کیا ہے. اور اس لیے جناب زینب نے جو مصیبتیں برداشت کی ہے، جس عنوان سے وہ روئی ہیں، وہ اسی عنوان سے ہے کہ حسین صرف حسین نہیں تھے بلکہ وہ اہل کساء کے نمائندے تھے. اور اس لیے آپ دیکھیں جن مشکلوں سے گزری ہیں کوئی اور نہیں گزرا ہے. امام سجاد موجود تھے اس وقت، لیکن مصلحت خدا تھی کہ ان کو بچانا تھا، لہٰذا وہ بیمار ہو گئے ہیں. لیکن آخری وقت اگر کوئی تھا جو دیکھ رہا تھا حسین کو، وہ زینب تھی. طلب زینبیہ پہ آنے کے بعد جب نشیب کی طرف دیکھتی ہیں کہ بھائی جو ہے زمین کربلا پر پڑے ہوئے ہیں اور شمر ملعون کا منحوس زانو جو ہے حسین کے متورک سینے پہ ہے. ایک مرتبہ عمر بن سعد سے کہتی ہیں انت تنظر، تو دیکھتا رہے گا اور میرا بھائی جو ہے قتل ہو جائے گا. اتنے میں وہ نیزہ بلند ہوا اور زینب دیکھتی ہے کہ بھائی کا سر نو کے نیزہ پر ہے، ہاتھ کو بلند کرتی ہے، اللہم تقبل من ھذا القربان، خداوند اس قربانی کو دین کی بقا کے خاطر قبول فرما. الا لعنۃ اللہ علی القوم الظالمین سیعلم الذین ظلموا ای منقلب ینقلبون. خداوند اس قلبات قبول فرما، ہمارے گناہوں کو بخش دے، ہماری توفیقات میں اضافہ فرما. خداوند عالم اسلام میں صلح اور امن کی فضا پیدا کر، تکفیری افواج کی تمام صلاحیتوں کو نیست و نابود فرما، امام کے ظہور میں تعجل فرما. ربنا تقبل منا انک انت السمیع العلیم.